The desk grid. They can be helpful, confusing, annoying, stressful, and even emotional sometimes. Hopefully, this will help you understand and navigate the use of a desk grid. Like yourselves, when I was in architecture school, I sometimes felt lost after my desk grid. I would ask myself, what did I just talk about? Or what should I do next? Why is the studio instructor so vague? Why am I being forced to do their design? Are they really going to fail me if I don't try their suggestions? And I will actually comment on the last point towards the end of this video. I think it's helpful if we break down the desk grid into a couple of concrete points. So first off, in short, what is a desk grid? I would say that the purpose of a desk grid is to help you explore and clarify your design intent. That's the short answer. The long description, I would say, is that a desk grid is a discussion and critique, not a criticism. So there's a difference between a critique and a criticism. It's a discussion and a critique of your design decisions to help you progress and resolve the clarity of your design concept. And yes, sometimes your desk grids can be intense, but the whole point is to help you find clear solutions to your design problem and to explore options, and most importantly, to establish the narrative or story of your design. So even if your instructor wanted you to implement their design suggestions, you, as the architecture student or as the design student, you need to establish a narrative that clearly articulates these ideas. And more importantly, you need to take ownership of those suggestions and of those critiques. Because when it comes to mid-review or your final review, you're not going to stand there and say, this is actually my studio instructor's idea, not mine. That's not really going to take you that far, and you're going to obviously get negative feedback. So when you're in your desk grid and you're sitting there and you're listening to your instructor give you feedback, and when you're having discussion, don't just like nod your head, but you feel confused inside. Actually listen, and you can question, obviously respectfully question, but definitely have a discussion. And if you don't understand what your instructor is describing because maybe of language barriers, or maybe they're just speaking in a very complex way, like they're expressing very complex ideas, then ask them to explain in a more simple manner, or ask them to show you examples. Now, the second point I would say is that you need to control the conversation and you need to manage expectations at a desk grid. So when you're going to have a desk grid, before you have it, you need to know what you want to get out of your desk grid and emphasize those goals visually. So your studio instructor can only critique on what they see. They can't read your mind, and you may have all these ideas in your head that make sense, but you can't forget that your studio instructor and even people who are critiquing your project for final reviews, for example, their time is limited and they haven't seen your project for a long time. And so they can only gauge your efforts from the work that you produce, not the ideas in your head. And so if you want to control the conversation about your ideas, you need to emphasize your concept visually, not only verbally. So for example, don't verbalize 3 design ideas, but then you only show one of them. And so you may be able to articulate your ideas eloquently, but you might be sacrificing what could be a great design because you fail to visually present an important aspect of your design. And it forces the instructor to assume rather than experience what you're trying to convey visually. And so another thing is that these desk grids are also a great mini practice session of how to articulate your ideas in a clear manner. And I can be the very first to tell you that I wasn't the greatest at presenting my ideas during final or even mid-review presentations. So it's definitely a work in progress, but you should use your desk crits as like a practice session of just the skill of presenting. So pay attention when you're in your desk crit, what resonates when you're describing your design and what seems like information overload. So the third point is you need to know when to push back and when to acquiesce. Simply, you need to pick your battles. So sometimes your studio instructor may suggest an idea that just seems so silly. Now, strictly in an academic setting, if you want to push back on suggestions that do not complement your design narrative, you should only, and I'm emphasizing this, you should only push back after, again, emphasize, after trying their suggestions and after trying options with their suggestions, and push back respectfully. You can say something along the lines of, I explored the suggestion that we discussed in our previous desk crit, and these are the options that I've developed. I'm leaning more towards this option because it reinforces the narrative of fill in the blanks. And so I think the luxury of an academic setting in a design curriculum is that it provides a platform for you to have healthy discussions and disagreements about design methods, systems, aesthetics, and narrative. But again, I need to emphasize this point. You should not push back if you did not even try their suggestions. So you definitely need to intake a critique, try the suggestions, try the options, see what works, see what you can hybridize. And if you really feel that, this is just not going along with my narrative, explain that. Be direct about it. And so more times often than not, your studio instructor will be receptive to your own critique after you intake their critique and their suggestions, because they want to feel heard and they want to know that you, as a design student or as an architecture student, that you're pushing options in your design rather than being timid in your design process. So there is this rare occasion where your studio instructor may seem so obsessed about a very particular or nuanced aspect about your design that you might find trivial, and it's not even really a big deal for you. And so at that point, it's really your choice whether to follow verbatim what they insist or go with one of your hybridized options between yours or theirs. And it may aggravate your instructor, but a sensible instructor will understand that you may want to take the risk with your own design decisions rather than following their exact verbatim suggestions. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a floor plan and massing scheme where the masses are oriented at 30-degree increments, but your instructor is just so fixated on 20-degree increments for whatever reason. Now, it's your job to explore, a 20-degree increment option to see maybe they're seeing something you don't see. And after you explore it, you feel like, I actually like this original 30-degree increment option. You want to discuss that with your instructor. And if they seem so fixated on it, it's really your choice at the end of the day, whether again, you want to acquiesce and just go with what they are just so fixated on, or you really want to stand your ground because you have a profound justification to oppose what they want. But in the greater scheme of things, if it's not really going to compromise your design intent, then just keep that in mind and really pick your battles. So what I just explained is strictly in an academic setting. You will also experience desk crits in a professional setting, which is going to lead to my next point, but I'll just stick to this point quickly about a professional setting. In a professional setting, you are also going to get suggestions from a client or from your principal or a manager, for example. The majority of clients actually suggest ideas or critiques that are quite helpful and improve your design. And just as an aside, you are most likely are not going to work with a client that doesn't believe in your design ethos to begin with. But sometimes a client may suggest an idea that's just plain silly. And it's your job as a designer to tactfully show how their suggestions may or may not be feasible. And again, you sometimes have to reluctantly go with a client's suggestion, especially if you know that it's not really going to compromise the overall narrative of the design or the design intent. Okay, now leading to the fourth point, it's how do you handle desk crits in a professional setting? So if you decide to work in an architectural practice or actually any design practice that requires an iterative process, whether it's more on the service sector or more on the design sector industry, you will have some kind of discussion in a team setting to resolve problems. The only difference is that the stakes are higher. You have a client you're servicing, a schedule that you need to follow, an agreed budget, a design intent you want to maintain. If you're in the architecture industry, you have to be careful about permitting and code compliance and construction progress. So you have to balance all of these things together. And as I mentioned in the previous point, you do not want to be in a position where your design principal or project designer or project architect or design director feels like they are not being heard when they give you a suggestion. If your design principal or project architect or any higher up gives you a design critique, no matter how bizarre or unfeasible it may be, it behooves you to explore their suggested options and then have a discussion. I want to give a personal experience. So I did a 5-year BArch, Bachelor of Architecture program. And I remember in my 4th-year studio, my instructor asked me to take 2 building masses that I designed and let them, in his own words, kiss. He wanted the 2 buildings to touch at one point. And so at first, I thought the idea was a little extreme because it would completely change the aesthetics of the massing. I was also a little concerned about time, and I felt that the conceptual narrative of the design was at a good place. And if I combine the 2 masses together, it may compromise the narrative. But, I tried some options, and not only did it enhance the design narrative, but at the final review, the feedback was, I would say, more on the positive end, and they really appreciated aspects about the design I didn't even consider. They pointed out this idea of how combining the masses allows the architecture to become a gateway in all orientations of the urban context. That wasn't even part of my presentation. I didn't even think about it like that. I need to mention some red flags in the culture of desk crits. And I would like to think that these scenarios are very rare, but these are scenarios that I have witnessed firsthand in architecture school. And I'm certain some of you may have also experienced this, whether personally or colleagues in architecture design school. And so red flag number 1 is if your instructor threatens to fail you because you are not following their exact design suggestion, even though you are clearly putting in an honest effort and are trying options with their design critique, that's a red flag, and you should report that to school administration, because the academic setting is for exploration. And we can also not forget the fact you're paying for this education, most likely. And if you're genuinely exploring their suggested options, but decide to go in a different direction, then you shouldn't be failed for not following verbatim a design instructor's idea. I mean, you can take the risk and you can possibly take the hit in your reviews where people may give you negative feedback or positive feedback. I mean, that's your risk to take. But if you're actually showing a clear effort that you are listening and you're being receptive to their ideas, but you want to take things in a little different direction, that's fair game. However, I need to emphasize, however, if you're a student that's clearly not putting in the effort or being obstinate to any suggestion from the instructor, then I may understand the justification of barely passing your studio core course or even failing if you end up getting negatively critiqued in your finals. Red flag number 2. If your design instructor is constantly suggesting starkly different ideas with zero consistency every time you meet, then that's a sign that you, yes, I'm emphasizing, you need to take more control over your design and be very clear in what direction you want to take your design. You should have at the outset of any design process and in any design profession, in any design discipline, you should have, an iteration of multiple different options. That's just part of the design process. But as you progress throughout the design process, you should start to reach a more consistent approach to your actual design so you have a clear narrative of what you're presenting. But if you feel that your instructor is making you design to the very last minute, or changing your design before finals, or taking you left and right and up and down well into the semester, that's their right to do that. But you need to know how to navigate your design in a clear direction. And so that's a red flag that requires you, not your instructor. Your instructor can give you any feedback they want. That requires you to take more control of the design direction. Red flag number 3. If your academic experience is being compromised, meaning you cannot really focus on your other courses, then that's a red flag that you are not allocating time appropriately. And I know that sometimes studio instructors believe that your life is in the studio and everything else is secondary, which is just unacceptable in my opinion. But it's imperative on you to expose yourself to various academic and cultural experiences. Taking courses outside of architecture or design like literature, art, figure drawing, philosophy, film, history, furniture design, environmental sciences, construction management, etc. It will make you a more informed individual and designer when you diversify your academic experience. So in conclusion, to wrap up and summarize these points, number 1, understand the purpose of a desk crit. Number 2, take control of the conversation. Have an expectation or goal from a desk crit. What are you trying to get out of it? What is your instructor expecting? Show your ideas. Don't just talk about them. Number 3, pick your battles. Know when to respectfully disagree versus accept. But under all circumstances, you must explore the suggested options before reaching conclusions. Number 4, desk crits do not stop at the academic level. They continue into a professional setting. Number 5, no matter how much you look at your design, people, yes, people, not just designers or architects or final reviewers, people, any person will see things in your design that you do not see. So do not undermine any design critique. I hope you found this helpful. I would really appreciate it if you posted your experiences in desk crit, what you thought about these points, or if you want to add any points to this video that you think people might find helpful that I didn't cover. If you have any comments or questions, again, leave them in the comments section below. And if you like this video, then I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe so that we can grow this channel. Thank you.